Okay, let's get into our next discussion in Hilchos Shabbos of the Tzurba M'Rabanan shiurim. Again, we are in volume 22, the Lax family edition of the volumes. This volume is the Dr. Harold and Magda Katz volume, various issues continuing with Hilchos Shabbos. And we are up to the two shiurim relating to Amira L'Akum, which we have not really touched on per se yet. And it's come up derech agav, but not in a way that we going to speak about it in a proper way. So we discuss electricity, we discuss other issues relating, and now we get into Amira L'Akum, asking a non-Jew to do malacha for me on Shabbos. So there is a misconception that people think that you could ask a guy to do anything you want, for sure, hinting, right, wink, right? We could ask a guy to do something, and just as long as we don't say the words, please do this for me, maybe even without just the word please, or without any type of sivui, it would be good enough. But it's not so simple. And sometimes it's usher to ask even hinting, and sometimes it's mutter to ask even directly. We have to get through the details. And again, we'll split up the shiur, which starts on page 171. We'll split up the shiur into two, as we usually do these discussions. So the pasuk tells us that I'm not allowed to do malacha on Shabbos. My wife, my family, I have to make sure my children don't do malacha. And also the pasuk tells us in source number 1, page 171, in Yisro and Atzeres and Dibros, my avadim can't do malacha for me. Your servant, your maidservant, uvehemtecha, your animal. So your servant can't do malacha for you on Shabbos. What does that mean, your servant? Is that right? Pasha's an Evet Kanani, not an Evet Ivri. An Evet Ivri is a full Jew. He has to keep Shabbos for himself. But Evet Kanani cannot do malacha for you. But there's a more expansive, maybe inclusive pasuk that we might, and some do, interpret as including even non-Jews. Pasuk tells us in Shmos in Perek Yud Beis, this is talking about Yantif, but it's connected to Shabbos as well. By Yom Rishon Mikra Kodesh, in source number 2, on the first day, Pesach Mikra Kodesh, Yom Shvi Mikra Kodesh, Yelachem, Kol Malacha Lo Ye'aseh Bahem. All Malacha shall not be done. It doesn't say you shall not do, but shall not be done, the nifal, Lo Ye'aseh Bahem, and on that, the Mechilta seems to include even non-Jews. I can't have a non-Jew do malacha for me, and that would be an issa d'oraisa. The pasuk shot of the Mechilta. Rashi, the Ramban, quote the Mechilta on that pasuk. Kol malacha lo yaseh b'hem. Lo sa'aseh ata, v'lo ya'aseh chavercha. You, your friend, v'lo ya'aseh nakri malachtecha. And a non-Jew. Ata omer kein, o eno ela lo sa'aseh ata, v'lo ya'aseh chavercha, v'ya'aseh nakri malachtecha. Is nakri really included in this? Maybe it's just you and your family. Tamalomar sheishes yamim te'aseh melacha shall be done. L'halamata b'chol melacha lo yaseh bahem lo taseh ata lo yaseh chavercha lo yaseh nafri melachtecha. And the pashut pshat of this medrash is that it's an issa d'oraisa, but it seems to be mefurish in the Gemara that it's not a d'oraisa. The Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Kufnun, towards the end of the Masechta, the Mishnah says there in Shabbos Kufnun, source number 4, a person is not allowed to hire out workers on Shabbos. I can't hire out the workers, and I shouldn't ask my friend to hire out the workers. What's the difference between him and his friend? Amar Papa Chaver Nachri. I'm not allowed to ask my non-Jewish friend to hire out workers for me. Ask the Gemara, why not? That's a daraisa. Maskal Ravashi, Amira L'Akum, Shvus. Right? That can't be the message of the Mishnah, because we already know that it's an Isser D'Rabbanan. Shvus. Shvus usually means an Isser D'Rabbanan. That's the unique language of Isuri D'Rabbanan of Shabbos, Shvus. So the Gemara says it's a D'Rabbanan. So says the Ramban, yes, it's D'Rabbanan. Rov Rishonim. Ruba of the Rishonim. 98% of Rishonim say, Amir L'Akum, asking a non-Jew to do malacha for me on Shabbos, and they do it for me, I have violated an Issa D'Rabbanan of Amira L'Akum based on the Gemara, and the Medrash is an Asmachta. You just had the Medrash by itself, you'd probably say it's a Daraisa. That's what it sounds like. But we interpret it as an Asmachta. Says the Ramban there, on that pasuk in Shmos Perek Yud Beis. V'machem alalu nachrim ein anu musarim b'Torah. Al malacha shel nachri klal. We are not commanded against malacha of a non-Jew on Shabbos. Lo b'yantiv lo b'Shabbos. El shish bo shvus b'dereim im ha'amira shelanu. Our Amira is also D'Rabbanan. Kamosha Amru, he quotes our Gemara, Amir L'Akum Shvus. Visit our Mavur b'Gemara. Ava Masati b'Mechilta. He quotes our Mechilta, Kol Malacha lo ye'aseh bahem, lo yaseh atah, lo taseh atah, lo yaseh chavercha, lo yaseh nafrim b'lachtecha, u'bevada hi asmachta ba'alma. It is for sure an asmachta. Shebo le'asar midivreim Amira melecha shalanu. That it is asar midirabanan to say, to ask a guy to do a malacha for me. The samcho salam mikrazeh. So the Ramban and Rov Rishonim assume it's innocent Rabbanan, but to note there are a few Rishonim, the Smag, the Uraim, and Source number 6 that hold no. Take the Mechilta literally. Take the Mechilta literally is innocent Daraisa. What did they do with the Gemara? You got to work that out. Lamanu Mikan says the Sefer Uraim, Rabbalasa Mimetz. Sha'asr Yisrael laniyacho v'kochem l'asam malachto. A Jew cannot leave and let a guy do malacha. Bein b'yantif, bein b'shabbos, mida oraisa. Again, we assume Mr. Rabbanan. The Sharatzi and the Mishnah Berurah summarizes. Ayin Beis Yosef, Sof Reish Bem Dalar, Mashakosva Mechilta, the B'Shem Asmag, the Sefuki Mesavkila, Ulai Udrasha Gemura, Ava Mikola Poskim Mashma Duhurak Midrabanan. We pass on as Drabanan, and he quotes the Ramban that maybe there's a mistake in the Mechilta. Either way, that's what we assume. It is an Isser Drabanan. So, message point number 1. Amir Lacham on Shabbos is an Isser D'Rabbanan. Point number 2, what's behind this Isser D'Rabbanan? Is there, so to speak, a motivation or a tam behind the Mitzvah D'Rabbanan? So, 3 Shitas in the Rishonim. Rashi, and the Rambam. So 2 Rashis and the Rambam that we have. Rashi in Shabbos, Rashi in Avodah Zarah, and the Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos. So let's see. Number 1, the Mishnah tells us the beginning of the last parak in Masechah Shabbos, Kufnun Gimel, parak Misha Hirshach. That's how the Mishnah starts off. Says the Mishnah, source 8. I'm traveling on the road, and I'm almost at my city, but I'm not there yet, so I'm still out in the middle of the street, and I'm in Rosh Hashanah, and I can't carry my wallet till I get to the street. I'm traveling with a guy, so I'll give the wallet to a guy. I can give it to a guy. Says the Gemara, my time is shortly Rabbanan. Why is this allowed? Amir Lakim is usher. Why is it allowed? So the Gemara says, because if we don't allow this, then the Jew is going to do something even worse. People aren't going to leave their wallet out. So what are they going to do? If you don't allow them to give it to the guy, they're just going to carry it in their own pocket. It's better to do Amir La'akum than to do an actual Isra of Hotzah. Says the Gemara, my time is Shari L'Rabbanan L'Meis of Kisel Anafri. Kimlu L'Rabbanan, the Rabbanan are sure. De'ein Adam Ma'amid Atzma Mamono. A person does not stand idly by and let his money be lost. If you do not allow it, then he's just going to carry Dalalamas in Rosh Hashanah. He'll take it himself and would rather not do that. Okay, that's the Gemara. But Rashi on that Havamina. But the Gemara asks, why is it mutter? Isn't it usher to ask some guy to do malacha for you? What does Rashi say there? My time is shari the Meis of Lanachri. V'harehu shlucho lisa ena b'Shabbos. Shlichus. The guy is the shliach of the Jew. And however you look at the principle of shlucho shalal nekamoso, the Jew is connected to the malacha of the guy. The guy is physically doing it, but it's shlichus, and therefore it's connected to the Jew, and therefore it is a problem. The question is, we know a guy is mufka from shlichus. We know the Gemara says in Maseches Kedushin, if a guy or the Mishnah in Shrumas, a guy can't be mafresh. I can't even make a guy a shliach lahafresh truma. A guy can't be a shliach. He's mufka b'nei Yisrael. So says Rabbi Kiva Eger in Hilchos Shabbos, source number 10, he discusses this Rashi. Ladias Daiti, source number 10 on the top now of 176. Yesh lomar damir la'akam d'asur chazal d'dami l'shlichus. That's really mean shlichus. It means ke'ilu. There's a concept in Achronim, yesh shlichus l'nachri l'chumra. Right, so that's maybe connected to this. Da'af de'ein shlichus l'nachri mikol makom. Kivan should be Yisrael kai gabna yesh bo shlichus. Asur chazal. Since this is a shlichus situation, it looks like shlichus, it smells like shlichus, so therefore we're going to call it shlichus, even though it's really not shlichus, but it's good enough for the Isser D'Rabbanan. That's Rashi in Shabbos Kufnun Gimel. Rashi in Avodah Zarah Daf Tezvav has a different idea. Avodah Zarah Tezvav, Rashi says we know that everything on Shabbos has to be different. Our clothing has to be different. Our attitude has to be different, and our speech has to be different. Right? The pasuk in Yeshayahu, Perek Nun Ches, Mimso Cheftzocha v'daber davar. The Gemara says, Shlo yehi diburach shel Shabbos k'diburach bechol. So Rashi says, asking a non-Jew to do malacha is a weekday malacha content speech, and that's usher on Shabbos. Says Rashi, U'masha asur liyisrael lomar lo ovi kochaver. Asei li kach. Do this for me, zel mishum mimso cheftzocha v'daber davar. Dibur Asur. That's Rashi. The Rambam has a third idea. So what do we have so far? Shlichus v'daber davar. And now the Rambam, Gezerah Shemayaseh. The Rambam says, if I ask a non-Jew to do malacha for me, it could be that I'm going to end up looking at Shabbos in a more lax way, and I'm going to end up doing malacha. Says the Rambam, Asr lomer lenachri, la'asos lanu malacha b'Shabbos. Says, Asr, for me to ask a non-Jew, even though the guy is not mitzvah, not only is the guy not mitzvah on Shabbos, he's not allowed to keep Shabbos. Still, even if he said, if I arrange it and I talk to him before Shabbos to do this, which by the way is maybe against Rashi. According to Rashi, there are nafkaminas between all of these shitas, and we're machmer like all of the reasons. According to Rashi in Avodah Zarah, what's the reason it's also because of the daber davar? According to that, if I arrange everything before Shabbos and I don't say a word to the guy on Shabbos, according to that reason, it's mutter. It will be aser. And the Rambam says it's aser also, even if you arrange it beforehand, because Shabbos would still be lax. And the Rambam says, even if I don't even need the malacha on Shabbos, I only need the malacha after Shabbos. So according to the Rambam, what does he say? Even if I arranged it before Shabbos, and I don't need it till after Shabbos. But I know I'm telling him to do it on Shabbos. If I ask a guy to do something for me, and he chooses to do it on Shabbos, that's his prerogative. But if I ask a guy to do something for me on Shabbos, I ask him before Shabbos, even though I'm only going to need it after Shabbos, that's also usher, says the Rambam. Why? The davar zeh asur midivrei sofrim kidei shalotia Shabbos kala beinayhem v'yavo lasos me'atzman. Because this is going to lead people to have a more lax approach to Shabbos, and they might come to do malacha themselves. Good. So again, included in this is, I just said, but now it's explicit in the sefer in front of you, page 177. What about making arrangements before Shabbos and benefiting it after Shabbos? So the Rambam said, beferish, both of those are asur. Both of those are asur, pre and post. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam, but adds that it is mutter to ask a guy after Shabbos, why didn't he do something previously? Because then that's not telling him to do anything the following week. It's just implying, talking about the past, but giving an implicit message of the future. That's allowed. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Shin Zayin. The Rambam is first quoted. Aser liskar polim v'lo lomar le'eno Yehudi liskar lo polim b'Shabbos afal b'sheini yisrael tzarach lo malach halach Shabbos. Even though I only need it afterwards. Shekol mash aser lasoso aser lomar le'eno Yehudi lasoso. Anything that's aser to do, it's aser to ask the non-Jew to do. Afilu lomar lo kodem chashecha lasoso b'Shabbos. Aser. What's the only thing that's mutter? Aval mutter lomar lo achar Shabbos lomar lo asita davar ploni b'Shabbos shavar. Why didn't you turn on the light? Why did you? So, yeah, afterwards I could do that. Even though it's going to be something that I'm going to use till next week. Again, we'll get to more details of that in the future. It explains that, this Rambam, Afal Pi in the next source. Afal Pi shemevin mitoch dvarav, sheritzono sheyasena b'Shabbos haba. Even though he understands from that I want him to do it next week. In b'kaklum. I say it during the week, and I'm not commanding him to do anything. I'm not talking about next week at all. The Nachri understands, but I'm not commanding him about next week at all. I'm not even commanding him in a derech remez about next week. I'm just commenting about something in the past, and therefore that would be allowed. What about asking a non-Jew to do something for the non-Jew's own benefit? So if it's for the non-Jew totally and I have no connection and no involvement, that would be mutter. But if there's any involvement by a Jew, that would be a problem. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Aser lomer le'Yehudi b'Shabbos, halach basar zeh b'bashelos l'sarchacha. I can't give a guy a piece of meat in order to cook for the guy on Shabbos. Afilu mizon nosav alav, even if I'm not responsible for his food. Father Rama says, though, I'm allowed to say, sure, go have a barbecue without giving him the meat. Because I'm not going to have a go. He's going to have a barbecue. He's going to eat. That's him. The first case, I'm giving him the meat. If I'm giving him the meat, that's why that's different. And that's how the Mishnah Berurah explains the chiluk. The kibbutz shelo haya davar me'olam shel Yisrael klal. If he's just having a barbecue, v'yeinu Yehudi osos gamkein rak b'shvel atzmo, there's no isur milakam. It's for him, and I don't have any involvement. That is part 2, so to speak, or maybe part 3. Number 1 was the Isser. Is it Daraisa D'Rabbanan? We pass it as D'Rabbanan. Number 2, part 2 is the behind the Isser D'Rabbanan, Shlichus davar davar or gzera. Number 2. Number 3 was even before Shabbos, even for after Shabbos, and there are limits even asking a non-Jew to do it for his own. That is all, though, within the rubric of asking a guy. There's a separate issue of once it was done, what type of benefit am I allowed to have? Again, we're going to have this in a future shiur where we talk about the Maisa Shabbos. The next major topic in this volume is going to be about Maisa Shabbos. This is related to that. That's about more of a benefit from a malacha that was done by a Jew. But here, what about benefit from an act done by a non-Jew on Shabbos? So besides the Isra of Amira La'akum, what about Maisa Shabbos, which is getting benefit from an act that was done? So the Mishnah talks about this in Shabbos too. The Mishnah in the 16th parak says, in source number 17, Nachri Shilak Azaner Mishtam Mishlar Yisrael. A guy turned on a light for himself. A guy's reading a book. A guy's lighting a candle. So if he does it for himself, I'm allowed to benefit too. Mishtam Mishlar Yisrael. Then Bishvil Yisrael also. But if a guy lit a candle for a Jew on Shabbos, I'm not allowed to get benefit from that, even if he didn't light it for me. Mila Mayim Hashkos Bamto Mashkach Rav Yisrael. But what if he filled up water? He got in the pail to give water to his animal. So then a Jew is allowed to take leftovers. But if he did it for a Jew, then it's usher because again that's usher. Again, this is usher even if the non-Jew was not asked. Why? Says the Tosfos and Mishvil Yisrael usher. If you're allowed to get benefit from it, if he does it, L'tzorach Yisrael, even if you didn't ask him to, it's going to end up asking. He's going to end up asking to do it. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. If a non-Jew does malacha for a Jew on Shabbos, I'm not allowed to get benefit from that malacha. I'm not allowed to get benefit, even if it wasn't done for me. Even say the whole thing is a d'Rabbanan. This is part of the d'Rabbanan. One is not allowed to get benefit from a malacha that was done by a guy for a Jew on Shabbos. But if the guy lit it for his own needs, or he lit it for a chola when he was allowed to. We discussed in the previous shiurim, a chola she'ein bo sakana, a guy is allowed to do a daraisa. Right, that's a chola she'ein bo sakana. Yesh bo sakana, a Jew could do a daraisa. But ein bo sakana, a guy can do a daraisa. Muter b'cha l'kol Yisrael l'shamish la'oro. So if he lit a candle for himself or for a chola, so then one is allowed to benefit from that. But what if, or there's a concern that a guy might do more knowing that I want to benefit. He's doing it for himself. But he knows that once he's at it, he might make some more. That's a problem. So it depends on the type of action, as we'll see. The Shulchan Aruch says in Shin Chaf Hey, enough where he goes out to the backyard and he rips up some grass to give to his animal. So if the Jew does not have any relationship with the non-Jew ripped up some grass, there's some leftover grass, so I can give it to my animal. But if they're friends, it's us, or why? Because if I'm friends, then maybe the guy, even next time for sure, will think, oh, my friend's going to want this also. I'll just rip out some more for him. It's Ke'ilu then gets into the shlichus issue, right? Not the davar davar, but the shlichus issue. Anything that is a chash of Shema Yarbe. But if there's no chash of Shema Yarbe, if it's one act, turning on a light, turning on a candle, it's what the Gemara says, Ner la'echad, ner la'meya. You're not doing any more for the Jew, or kevesh, like rainbow. It's a ramp that comes down from a boat. A boat, you have to build the same ramp for one person and 10 people, so then it will be mutter. Again, if there's any chash, you're not allowed to benefit from a halacha done for a Jew for Shabbos. But if it was done for a guy, you're allowed to benefit as long as there's no chash that he did or he will be marbe bishvelcha. But if he will, like if a guy is cooking for a chola and he knows that you love potatoes, he's going to put in more potatoes in the pot, so then that could be a problem. And the Shmir Shabbos summarizes this distinction. Again, it depends on the type of act. It says the Shmir Shabbos in source 21. A guy that does a malacha d'oraisa, mutar l'kol adam le'enos mimeno afilu b'Shabbos. So if he does it for a chole or for a guy, you're allowed to get benefit from that. V'hu she'ein makom lachshosh sha'anachri hosif o yosif b'malacha b'shalabari. As long as there's no chash that he did or he will be mosif. But if he's going to be mosif, he might add for the Jew. So then that is a problem. Avlam Kiyim, the top of 181. Avlam Kiyim Achshash, Shanachri Hosif, O Yosef b'Malacha b'Shalabari. or there's something muksa involved, the healthy person, the other person cannot get any benefit from Shabbos, and after Shabbos you have to wait, as we'll talk about. Lefichach, osnun daled, right there. Nachri shil garbage shel chola. So if a non-Jew lit a light, turned on the light for a chola, then I could use that light, because he didn't light any more light for me. He's just turning on the light. But if the Nachri cooked for a sick Jew, I can't use it until Motzi Shabbos. Maybe he'll know I want some, so he will add. And the same thing with if he does not for a chola, but for himself. The Shemir Shabbos, though, quoted this concept of b'chdei sheya'asu, with the amount of time that it takes to make the item or do the malacha after Shabbos. That's the principle of waiting b'chdei sheyasu. Meaning, even if I can't get benefit on Shabbos, I can't get benefit right after Shabbos either, until I wait the amount of time that it would have taken to do the malacha. So what does that b'chdei sheyasu, what's that concept about? Why is there a concept of b'chdei sheyasu that even after Shabbos you can get benefit, you have to wait b'chdei sheyasu? So machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos. What is the background? What's the message of that? Rav Papa, Beit Zachav Dalet, source 22. Hilchasa, Nachri Shevi Dor only Yisrael b'Yantif, if a non-Jew brought a present to a Jew on Yantif. Im Yeshmi also Amin ben Mechubar Aser. If you know that he ripped it out of the ground, he brought flowers, he did a malacha, Aser. So that's a non-Jew did a malacha for a Jew on Shabbos, he can't get benefit from it. He did the malacha of kotzer. And even that night, you can't get any benefit from what he did until the amount of time that it would have taken him to do that malacha, to go, to rip out the flowers, to bring it back. So what's the message? Rashi says there, Beis Chav Daled, Kidei shelo yeneh v'malechas yantif. Because if you get benefit, any type of benefit before B'chlei Shiasu is still considered hana from a malacha that was on yantif illegally. If you wait the time, then you're not getting any benefit from what was done then, because you could have just done afterwards. So shelo yeneh Mimalefas Yantif. Tosfos does not like this daya. Tosfos quotes Hikshaler repeats Shri. L'kav Yeshiyasu Shlo Yana. If Kenem Mavashal B'Shabbos B'Shogeg. But my Yochel and Enemy Malachas Shabbos. Right, but we're going to get to that. Bishul B'Shabbos B'Shogeg. Vadai says Tosfos. The reason is no. If you were allowed to get benefit right afterwards, then maybe next time you'll ask the guy to do it. If you have to wait anyway, the amount of time, then you're not going to come to ask the guy because you're not saving yourself anything after Shabbos. But if you get it right afterwards, Shema Yom Alanachri Lake Valakate. So Rashi Tosfos, but the reasons are, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes both reasons. Rashi and Tosfos, again, they're Beis Zachav Dalet, the beginning of that third parak. Shulchan Aruch says, Shin Chav Hey, source 25, Im Likit V'tzad B'Shvil Yisrael, O B'Shvil Yisrael Ve'enu Yehudi, Tzorch Lahamtim La'er B'Chlei Shiyasu. You have to be B'Chlei Shiyasu, the Mishnah Berurah, V'yatam Da'asru Lakol, Ad Chlei Shiyasu, number 1. Shelo yehenu mimalacha nasis b'shvil yisol b'Shabbos. Rashi, you can't get any hana. V'gam the gazu the kshiyamuter b'motzi Shabbos miyad. If you're allowed to get it right away, yomer leini yehudi b'Shabbos. It'll lead you to allow because you're going to want it right after Shabbos. So therefore, that's why Rachel Rashi Tosfos. What exactly was the reason? The Mishnah Berurah here and adds on a couple of other important details about b'chdei sheyasu. It applies whenever the goy did malacha for Jews. For Jews, it applies to any Jew, right? The b'chdei sheyasu, even not the one that it was na'asis b'shvilo, it only applies to malacha da'oraises, as we will see. So it says, see some of the Mishnah Berurah. Kagon, shayamechzi Yisrael mechza Yehudim. If he doesn't b'shvil Jew and non-Jew, it means there are some Jews and some non-Jews in there. If there are some Jews in there, even if there are majority non-Jews, it's still going to be usher. Still going to be usher. Because that's also, it says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkatan Chavches, Afilu Yisrael Acher, Shlo Nilkad Bishvilo. Kivan to Asa Malacha, the Raisa Bishvil Yisrael, it is usher. And again, the travel time counts. If the guys would have to go somewhere and then come back, so then that counts in the length of time that you have to wait, bichdei. There is an exception to the rule. Shulchan Aruch quotes that if it is a public malacha, and everybody knows that the goy did this for a Jew on Shabbos, it could be that it's usher forever. For example, if everybody knows that this goy made a coffin for a Jew on Shabbos, that's the case of the Shulchan Aruch, then it's usher forever, because it'll be such a chil Hashem and a bizayon that everybody will know. Everybody will know this, right? The Shulchan Aruch says in Shin Chav Hey, you have it here, in Asa Enu Yehudi B'Shabbos Aron O Kever La'atzmo, Mutali Soli Kaverbo. If a goy made a coffin for himself, So then mutter for a Jew to be buried in it. If you made it for a Jew on Shabbos, never. Why? If everybody knows about it. Again, if anything is done in a public way, that'll be a bizayin. So, if a malacha is done by a Jew, by a guy in the wrong way, again, we have to talk about what's the right way, what's allowed. But if it was done for a Jew, so then that wasn't sick, then it's asur and one has to be b'chlei shiyasu. But as we just said, and let's talk about it now, only for isurei da'oraisa. If a guy, you have to know what's an isur da'oraisa, what's an isur da'rabanan. But if a guy did a malacha da'oraisa, that's where b'chlei shiyasu comes up. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says. That's what were the cases that we had where he did kotzer, where he did trapping. V'hu adin, says the Mishnah Berurah, source 29. B'chol ha'malachas da'oraisa, she'asa ha'inu Yehudi b'shvil Yisrael, malacha da'oraisa. Even without being commanded, still not allowed to get benefit from it. But if you did an isur d'Rabbanan, for Ruvain, then another Jew, Shimon, could get benefit from it right away. Right? This is the Gemara Maseches Meitzah. There in that same Gemara, Chav Dal and Chav Hey, source number 30. If there's no, not from that min b'mechubar, meaning the guy must have not picked it, all the apples were already cut, so you know there was no malacha daraisa done. Tochat tchum mutter. If he brings it from inside the tchum, then everything's mutter. Chutz tchum, outside the tchum, we paskin tchum in the darabanan, meaning if a guy does a malacha darabanan, asur, v'haba b'shvil Yisrael, zeh mutter l'Yisrael acher. But a different Jew can benefit from it in that case. So if it's a darabanan, we say there's, as we'll see, there might not be b'chdei sheyasu, and a Jew, another Jew, can get benefit right away. That's what the Gemara says in Maseches Beitzah. And what about for the Jew who the action was done for? Another Jew could get benefit right away. What about for the action was done for? So that's a machlokas Rishonim. Whether that Jew has to wait b'chdei sheyasu or not. According to Tosfos, there's no chi b'chdei sheyasu, even for the one that's not says b'shvilo. Right? Tosfos says, asur b'chlei shiyasu v'ri piresh delo echmiru ela b'davar she'asa b'malacha. A malacha d'oraisa, there's b'chlei shiyasu. If this is d'Rabbanan, there's no b'chlei shiyasu, and the one that not says b'shvilo can get benefit right after Shabbos. Somebody else can get benefit right away. You don't even have to wait. But the Ran does not think there's such a chiluk. The Ran thinks that the intended beneficiary, the na'asis b'shvilo, would have to wait b'chlei shiyasu, even if it was only an isur d'Rabbanan. Right? The only difference with the Raisa d'Rabbanan is that a different Jew can get benefit right away. As we said, that's beferish in the Gemara. That's what the Gemara said back in source 30. The Ran can't argue on that. But in terms of b'chdei shiyasu, the Ran assumes that even if it's an isur d'Rabbanan, one has to wait b'chdei shiyasu for the na'asis b'shvilo. That's the Ran in 32. Mistaver de be'ein b'mino b'mechubar bina nami l'er b'chdei shiyasu. You still need b'chdei shiyasu. The low killed fei ain b'mino b'mechubar mishiesh b'mino elishu mutar l'Yisrael acher. The only difference is for a different Jew. That is what Tosfos says. Otherwise, he notes ve'no nira. I don't like Tosfos. The Shulchan Aruch quotes both days, but he quotes the Ran as a stama. So in the stama, he seems to hold like the Ran. Seems all like the Ran. Avalechol asur bo bayom l'fi shuva b'shvilo l'er v'chlei sheyasu u'lachir mutar bo bayom. Some say it's mutter right away. That's Tosfos. But again, this is the Shulchan Aruch. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be machmir, be like the Ran. Again, the Mishnah Berurah also adds that even in the case of a d'Rabbanan, the chumrah regarding the bishvilo is not only one person. If it was made for a family, then the whole family is included in the bishvilo. One other ha'ara, in a case where a guy did a malacha for a Jew, what if he turned on the lights in the house? A Jew has to leave the house? He didn't ask him to do it, and he didn't want him to do it, so you have to leave the house? So the Shulchan Aruch says that, the Ramah says that one would not have to leave the house. Mihu, says the Ramah, 35, Imasa enu Yehudi b'bayis b'beis Yisrael midaito, ein Yisrael v'torach latzeis. Al v'shenenem and aner madura. You can't, b'kavana, if it's one room, don't sit in that room. But if ain't brera, I've turned on all the lights, so then one doesn't have to leave. But that's only once the malacha was done. Before the malacha was done, you have to ask the guy not to do it. They're going to do it, and this is very unusual. People think the guy's doing it already. I didn't ask him to. But if he's doing malacha for me, he knows that I want it only for me. I could try to get it in a way that he's going to get benefit from it too. But that's what we need, that a goy is going to get benefit from it too, and in that way that would be allowed. Okay, there's a lot more, but this is part one of our discussion of Amir La'akum.